Hello, and welcome back to my allegiance breakdowns for Weird's The Other Side. Now that I finished covering the two syndicates in the starter box, it's time to start in on the full-sized allegiances. Today I'll cover the first of these, the King's Empire. The King's Empire are a deceptively simple allegiance if you just look at their allegiance card. Remember that they're an Earth-side allegiance, so you can take the generic Earth assets and stratagems in addition to what I'm covering here. Their glory mechanic, for King and Country, is one of the more challenging ones, letting you flip a unit when its fire teams kill an enemy fire team. This means that your opponent has a degree of control over which of your units are allowed to get 2 glory. The British Army gives all of their melee and missile actions the trigger Hail of Gunfire to give the enemy a pin token. Since all of the King's Empire units always have this, it means your opponent will have a hard time reinforcing or moving where they want to go. Bayonets lets them treat their missile actions like melee actions, with the standard melee action range of 2 inches, but they get a -2 AV penalty when they do this. Note that when you do this, the action is not treated as a missile action at all, so things that give boosts to missile actions or let them take additional missile actions don't work here. Lastly, Rapid Maneuvering lets them take a missile action instead of a melee action on the rush order, but they have to discard a card to do this. It's a really nice option to have for when you really need that extra distance or change of position to take the enemy down. The King's Empire currently has 4 in-allegiance commanders to choose from, and Charles Edmonton is the more support-oriented of these. He comes in on a 50mm base with decent AVs. He has a long-range sniper rifle with a great AV, which can and should have your opponents afraid. It's only strength 2, but it has built-in piercing and a built-in trigger to give accurate for just when you want it. Plus, he doesn't have to discard a card when shooting into engagements. His basic morale action, Volley Fire on My Mark, is really nice. It's a bit short-ranged, but it gives the squad an inspired token and lets one of their fire teams take a free shot. Since he targets the unit as a whole, the fire team that actually takes that shot does not have to be the one that was in range of Charles. In Glory, this can also give their shot piercing, which can be very good when you're trying to help a weaker unit get a kill to flip to Glory. Note that the action they take has to be a missile action, so you can't use this with bayonets. When he gets to Glory, which shouldn't take long with that gun, he gets a really nice action, Hold It Steady, which gives nearby friendly fire teams, besides himself, 4-inch extra range on their guns. Since he doesn't have to be anywhere near the front, this can be really good for picking off enemies before they get a chance to hit you back. Lastly, his other morale action is Where'd He Go? This lets him teleport to an unengaged friendly fire team that he can see, which can give him some really crazy angles to take down the enemy. As an added bonus, it has the snapshot trigger, letting you take a free extra sniper shot. Getting off 2 accurate piercing shots in a turn can devastate the enemy commander. His personal asset, Stoic Demeanor, is pretty nice. It lets you discard a card when a nearby unit gets an inspired token to also give them a reinforcement token. Not bad, if a bit costly. Now, you'll notice on screen that I've put up some big text saying this card was errated. For some reason, Weird didn't note that on any of the actual cards, so if you see this text and have physical cards, check the errata to see if you've got outdated ones. The Empire's second commander, Margaret Belle, is basically a super solo. Maggie offers no support at all, instead choosing to do the job herself. Sitting on a 40mm base, her AVs are excellent across the board, letting her zip around and survive plenty of enemy attacks. The zipping around is aided by her ability Shadow Magic, giving her a free 8-inch teleport when she activates. You can also discard a tactics token to make that 16 inches for when you really need to get somewhere. She's the only King's Empire unit without any missile actions, but instead she has a really brutal poisoned knife. It is a great AV with good strength, and when she targets champions, it gets +1 strength and accurate. In Glory, this gets 2 triggers. The first is built in, flipping her target out of Glory. The second gives her knife piercing. Her first morale action, Backstab, is where she starts to get really scary. It's the same range as her melee action, and it prevents her target from cheating for the rest of the activation, cutting off their ways to survive what's coming. It has a trigger to hand out a Shaken token to make her next attack even easier to land. In Glory, this also gets a built-in trigger for a free stabbing, which is fantastic. Her Glory-only morale action is His Majesty's Secret Service. This doesn't need a flip to succeed, letting you just draw 2 cards. As a nice bonus, if you drew a king, you can choose to show it off to your opponent to give any enemy a Shaken token. This gives you an interesting choice, deciding what's worth more to you at that moment, the targeted debuff or your opponent knowing some of your hand. Now, Margaret being a melee unit, naturally she needs ways to stay alive, and her personal asset, Rapier Wit, gives her an amazing one. Its ability Hide in Plain Sight lets you spend a tactics token to force an enemy to target someone she's engaged with, which can include the attacker itself. Remember that if you force your opponent to target one of their own fire teams, they still flip and modify for both the attacker and the defender, since they're both their units. However, if they let the attacker succeed for some reason, then you're the one who does the penetration flip, since that's always done by the opposing player. Even though it's costly to use, just the threat of it can make your opponent scared to go after her, especially if she engages the enemy commander. The asset also gives her another morale action, Ruthless Mockery, letting her dump the target's tokens and move the fire team around. If the enemy is stockpiling inspired or reinforcement tokens, this can be a good way to punish them for it. Moving on to the dual allegiance commanders, first we have Kassa Okoye from Abyssinia. She comes in on a 40 mil base with fair AVs. Just about everything on her card is about Titans, so if you're bringing her, you better have a King's Hand in your company, or bring some mechanized infantry or Steel Legion from Abyssinia. I'll cover all of her Titan-centric things first. To start off, Spare Parts lets her draw a card every time a nearby Titan's asset is damaged or discarded. Her magic action, Divert Power, lets her tell a friendly fire team to take an action instead of her. In Glory, this gets a trigger to give them an inspired token too. In Glory, she comes up with a backup plan. This lets her gain a free stratagem that costs 3 or less whenever one of her King's Hands dies. However, letting them die is definitely not on the agenda. In Glory, she also gets her morale action, Emergency Repairs. This is pretty short range, only 3 inches, but lets you repair a Titan's damaged asset. If you do this, you also get to draw a card, and it has a trigger to repair a second asset too. Funnily enough, this is her only morale action, so you want to get her to Glory ASAP, or give her an asset with a morale action so she's not stuck with just the 1 action per activation. Lastly, for when there's just no Titans around to boost, she has her Modified Machine Gun. This has a decent AV and range, and gives a free pin token out too. It has a trigger to gain piercing, and in Glory, another one to shoot a second time if you win hard enough. In Glory, it also gets a built-in tome. Keep that in mind for when we look at the Envoys from Abyssinia card. Her personal asset in the King's Empire is Bigger is Better, which is expensive at 2 script, but gives 2 valuable abilities. The Mind of a Giant increases her tactics AV by the number of Titans in play, friendly and enemy, going from her base of 2 up to 4. The Glory of Knowledge lets her get around the King's Empire's usual glory mechanic, letting her pay a tactics token to flip to glory instead. Their Envoy card also gives her access to the 2 triggers, both of which are fantastic. Remember that while she's in glory, she has a tome built into her missile action, letting her access that card draw for free. If you do take Abyssinia as your Envoy, you can give her any of Abyssinia's assets. This includes her other personal one, Power Output Sensors, which also gives her 2 abilities. Interesting Readings rewards you for spending resources on her. When she uses a tactics token to flip another card, she can draw the card not used. If you use the stronger card in the duel, you at least get a card in your hand, but it also means you can choose to use the weaker card to draw the stronger one for later. Lastly, Odd Results lets you discard a card when she activates to draw a new, hopefully better one. The King's Empire's other dual allegiance commander is Reo Edwards from the Three Kingdoms. He comes in on a 40 mil base and has good AVs. His ability Point Blank is basically an upgraded version of Bayonets. Instead of taking a penalty to turn a missile action into a melee one, he can just shoot at whoever's engaging him with no penalty. This ability is really important on him, since his guns aren't super long range, so he wants to be leading at or near the front lines. His custom pistols have a great AV and decent strength, but a lot of the power is in the triggers. Strafe turns your spare margin into extra movement, 1 inch per margin spent, which makes him really hard for your opponent to pin down. In the sore spots lets you give a token of your choice to the target. His morale action, Commandeer, forces your opponent to discard a random card and lets you draw a card from your discard pile that's of the same suit. Being able to constantly harass your enemy's hand like this can be great to keep the advantage in your direction. In Glory, this also gets a trigger to draw his personal stratagem for free. You heard me right, he has his own personal stratagem card. This comes from his Glory ability, Infiltration, which makes your opponent reveal their entire stratagem deck for a nice bit of intel, and you gain the stratagem Steal Battle Plans. This stratagem becomes a copy of one of your enemy's stratagems, as long as it doesn't summon in units. This lets you use their own tricks against them. You can even choose whether you want to have it affect friendly or enemy markers too. His King's Empire asset is Privateer, which makes him even better in melee range. Boarding Party lets his friends shoot at enemies he is engaged with without needing to discard a card. Cut Them Down pairs nicely both with that and the King's Empire's universal Hail of Gunfire trigger. Anytime an enemy unit that Reo's engaged with gains a pin token, he auto-hits any of their fire teams at Strength 2. Taking Reo lets you benefit from the Envoys of the Kingdoms, which gives him 2 abilities, but an honorable death does basically nothing for him personally since you don't want him to die. The Way of War is excellent though, letting him flip to glory whenever you use a stratagem. Taking this Envoy card also lets him attach any Three Kingdoms assets, including his other personal one. Expert Maneuvers only has 1 ability, but if you lean into it, then it's fantastic. This lets you discard a tactics token or a card after playing a stratagem to have Reo take a free action. If you're taking a bunch of reusable or cheap stratagems, this can get you a lot of extra actions. Moving along to the King's Empire's generic commander assets, Military Assistant is their unique one and with good reason. It gives the ability Always Ready with T, which increases all of the unit's AVs by 1. That's really everything: speed, defense, willpower, armor, all of their actions, and even tactics. It also gives you a trigger to all of their actions to draw a card once per activation, which is always good to have. Both Maggie and Kassa have a built-in tome on their attacks in Glory, letting you easily benefit from this trigger on either of them. The other commander asset, Sturdy Binoculars, gives the unit a morale action, Fire on My Command. This is similar to Charles's basic morale action, but instead of an inspired token, it gives extra range. Their generic champion asset is Radio Transmitter. This gives the ability When I Know, You'll Know, giving 1 free suit to a nearby friendly unit per turn. This can include the unit with the upgrade, which can be fantastic. For example, Charles being able to take his Where'd He Go action and guarantee the ram for the snapshot trigger is great. Time to talk Titans with the King's Hand. Like most Titans, it's 7 script for 1 120mm fire team with a single model. It has bad defense and willpower, but great armor. Its ability targeting parameters lets it shoot into engagements without having to discard a card. To go along with that, its Gatling gun has decent range and a solid strength that's easier to spike up than normal with its powerful shot trigger. When it's in Glory, it can even help flip other friendlies to Glory if you win hard enough. Also when it's in Glory, it gets to use the Imperial Kick. It's pretty accurate with great strength, and is versus the target's speed AV, which is unusual. Like with the Gatling gun, it can also help flip nearby enemies to Glory. The first pair of its assets for you to choose from are for its right arm, both giving a versatile missile action. Armor-piercing machine gun is for killing single targets. Strength 4 and piercing can do a ton of focus damage. Like the Gatling gun, this has the powerful shot trigger and also concentrated fire to really help spike up the damage. Gatling machine gun, on the other hand, has only okay strength but built-in area. Both of its triggers are all about spreading out the damage. Wide Arc makes your area cover more of the board, and Rake with Gunfire lets you shoot again against a different target. The left arm's assets give you some pretty wild options. Massive Drill gives 2 new actions, but they are not versatile. The first is a melee action of the same name, with Strength 3 and Piercing, which cracks through armor easily. The second is the morale action Drill Baby Drill, which doesn't need a flip, just dropping a 50mm piece of difficult low terrain, and auto-hits anything touching it for Strength 3. This is great for when you're up against hard-to-hit enemies. The other option, Symbol of the Realm, gives you a versatile morale action, Symbol of Power. This has a great range, forcing the target to lose all of its tokens and flip out of Glory. Depending on what allegiance you're going up against, this can be absolutely devastating to your opponent. The last asset choice is for the head. The first of these, Soulstone Processing Matrix, gives you 2 abilities. Automated Defenses lets you discard 2 cards to block 1 damage, which is expensive, but good to have in a pinch. Moment of Free Will gives you +1 AV during all duels you're in, as long as you're in Glory. This is only in duels though, so it doesn't speed up your movement, but it's otherwise solid. Lastly, we have Soulstone Powered Laser. This gives you a versatile morale action, Unleash Harnessed Power. It's short range, but high strength, and lets you draw a card if you kill a fire team with it. Moving on, we come to the units without special unit rules, starting with the Motor Scout. These are 2 script for 1 50mm fire team with a single model on it. Their defensive AVs are pretty bad, but speed 8 is great. They also have the ability Fast and Lightweight, making them even faster and gives them an inspired token when they take the rush order. They come with a machine gun, which has so-so AV range and strength, but always gives a free pin token on a hit, which is nice. It also comes with the trigger Pedal Faster, as it gives them free movement after. If you manage to flip them to Glory, they get an amazingly named morale action. My Velocipede is a resounding success. You can buy one for only £10. You are absolutely obligated to say that name every time you use it. This flips them out of Glory, but has you summon in another Motor Scout. The artillery team is 3 script for one 120mm fire team with 3 models on it. These have terrible AVs, but they should be nowhere near the enemy, so it's probably okay. Their ability Heavy Gun stops the enemy from moving them, making sure you stay right where you want to be. Their other ability, Lobbing Shot, is great. This lets you shoot at enemies even if you don't have a line of sight. Speaking of shooting, their Heavy Howitzer has a real punch to it. Its AV is bad, and they can't target enemies that are too close to them, but base strength 6 and 48-inch range are incredible. In Glory, this gets triggers to gain area or drop hazardous 3 terrain on a miss. In Glory, they also get a morale missile action, Heavy Shelling. It's more accurate than the Howitzer, but way lower strength and range. This is more of a support move, blasting the enemy with shaken tokens so the rest of your company can hit the target too. And that's it for this week. Next time, I'll cover the King's Empire's squads, stratagems, and how to start playing as them. Until then, happy gaming!